Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how to begin your first painting. You'll notice that I've got my canvas, which has been coated with 2 coats of sanded gesso, and it also has, in pencil, I've lightly drawn in the composition that I'm going to work with for this painting. Now, when you're painting, you want to work from your biggest brush down to your smallest brush. Your smallest brushes should be what you use last. So I picked out a pretty big flat brush, and I'm loading it up here with my longest medium, either linseed oil, if you're in the linseed oil family, or galkyd lite, to really get like a very wet painting um, where the pigment goes a long way. And I am using only in the beginning burnt umber to get a very traditional brownish scale painting that I'm going to paint over the top. And I am just quickly blocking in the values as I see them in my still life. You can't see it in this video, but I have my my still life set up over to the side, and I'm getting all of my information now from that, the shape of the shadows, trying to get a sense of where the highlights are. We're doing just a scale painting, and so I want to be very careful to leave the whites and the highlights of my painting pure white of the canvas. I'm not going to touch those basically at all. And I'm laying down pigment where I know I'm going to be painting my midtones, my shadows, and my dark values. So you can see that I'm just kind of trying to get paint down on this surface. And this surface that we're using for the first painting is a slow surface. With 2 coats of gesso on canvas, you're going to notice that when you're using your brushes, it kind of feels like you're dragging your brushes across almost like almost close to like a sandpaper. And right here, you can actually see you can remove the paint off of the canvas, and you can put a little bit of Gamsol on a paper towel, and you can actually remove back to lighten up the painting if you need to. This is called a Brunei painting. It's a painting that's done completely in a brown undertone. And at this point, I'm going to shift over and pick out a flat brush that I'm going to start blocking in. It makes sense, right, to block in a painting with a flat brush. So I am going to, again, pick my biggest brush that I can, and I'm going to start, as I showed you on the color palette, laying down my darkest colors first. And you always need to remember, where you have warm light, you're going to have cool shadow. And where you have cool light, you're going to have warm shadow. So my still life, as I see it, has a warm light coming in from the left and kind of a cool light coming in from the window on the right, which means I'm going to have warm light coming in from the left and cool shadow. And so I'm taking, from my color palette that I showed you how to set up, I am right now taking my cool and darkest colors from the color palette, and I'm looking at my still life to see where I see my darkest colors and my coolest colors, and that's what I'm starting to put in. I'm seeing a lot of dark and cool on the onion, so I'm feeling pretty confident that I can put those marks in and block those dark values in. I'm seeing it on the right side of the pineapple. I'm seeing it on the places where the light just isn't getting to. And again, I'm seeing that all as cool darks for right now. Um, and I know that means that in my white areas of the painting that I've left white, I'm going to have to deal with the white warmer tones. You'll see it, this flat brush is doing a good job at kind of carving into the space, and it's really kind of letting me draw in where I think I'm going to go back in and paint. And everything we're doing right now is still considered an underpainting. Um, we're changing this Brunei kind of color wash of browns, and we're turning it into a grisaille painting, which a lot of the old masters, specifically like Eng, would begin their paintings with a grayscale painting and then would slowly glaze in their colors over the top of these grayscale paintings. And so for this first painting, what you're essentially doing is allowing your eye to take time to really get a sense of warm grays and cool grays, warm light and cool light, which is one of the more difficult things to do, but it'll make it easier when we shift to color in our next painting. Spending this much time trying to analyze, am I seeing a warm light or a cool light envelop this object that I'm trying to paint right now? As I showed you in the glass palette medium demo, I'm not mixing any color at this point. I am simply taking my pure colors that I've already mixed on my color palette from the 3-step achromatic color range, and I am just assigning those colors to what I see in my still life. And I'm not mixing them, I'm laying them down next to each other. And later, I will start to kind of take my brushes and run the seam along them to actually mix the colors together. Once I feel confident they have the blocked in values here. Now, one thing I didn't mention, but I'm going to now, I did my first coat, I'm in the galkyd family. I did my first coat with the burnt umber in galkyd lite, which is a long medium, and I've shifted now to galkyd. And this stage that I'm doing in is the galkyd medium that I've introduced. When you're using your mediums, you always want to go from thin to thick, meaning you want to start with your long mediums first and slowly start to get to mediums that don't run on you. And galkyd is a really great medium that you're going to do most of your painting with. It doesn't run, it stays where you want it to, and it lets you mix the colors really well. So in the galkyd family, I did my umber painting in galkyd lite, and now that I'm doing this color blocking, I've already switched over to galkyd. If you're working with linseed oil and stand oil in that family, you'd want to do your umber wash with linseed oil, and then you'd want to slowly start bringing in stand oil to make the linseed oil a little bit of a thicker consistency and a little bit of a less of a long medium on this surface. It might be a lot to throw at you in the very beginning, but again, in this painting, you want to go big brush to small brush, thin paint to thick paint, and you want to go dark values to light values. Your highlights should always be the last thing that you address on your canvas, because it's very difficult to get back your values to darken up colors. It's always easier with an oil painting to lighten the colors you're working with. So you can always go lighten things up, but if you have like a highlight, it's very difficult to darken that highlight without muddying the color. You want to paint thin paint first and slowly begin to thicken the paint because of the chemistry of what we're doing with oil paint. It can start to crack on you if you have thicker paint underneath the surface of like thinner glazes. So always take it slowly with adding more and more and more paint to your mediums. In the very beginning, you should be using mostly linseed oil or galkyd lite, and then you're slowly going to let yourself use more just pure pigment. And by the end of your painting, you might not even be mixing in medium at all. You might just be using pure color straight off of your palette without any mediums introduced to it. You'll notice I'm still using the flat brush because I'm still in the blocking in stage. For this video, I really want to show you kind of a single sitting of painting where I like to get a still life painting to in one sitting. I've sped this video up so it takes about 15 minutes. In reality, this was about 45 minutes to an hour of painting. But if you get this much done in your first sitting, you'll be in a really good spot. So give yourself about an hour, hour and a half, since this might be your first time doing this type of painting, to do a color wash and just get pigment on the surface of the canvas in burnt umber or burnt sienna. You can also use burnt sienna. And then try to get a blocked in idea painting using and trying to figure out very quickly without mixing your color, am I looking at warm light or am I looking at cool light? Am I looking at warm shadow? Am I looking at cool shadow? And just trying to get your grays right in this very beginning part of this painting. This is going to look like a rough, quick painting. It's not going to be super blended, and that doesn't bother me too much. I really just want to kind of leave reminders in this painting for later on where my light's coming from. And I always want to err on the side of being dramatic about the light, if anything. I can create subtlety later on when I'm starting to glaze, but for right now I really want to make sure that I'm remembering at every step there's a lot of light coming in from the left of this still life, and it gets pretty dramatic and intense on the right side of the pineapple, and the onions really start to kind of blend into the background in this very nice way. At this stage, you should not be focusing on detail. I know that's probably difficult being new to painting because you're able to see a lot more than you're painting at this point in the process. But at this stage, it's really important to not paint detail and not overpaint what you're looking at. That's going to come in handy when we switch to liquid and we start glazing in detail. But for right now, even though you can see it, you're not going to paint all of it. You're just trying to get the planes of what you're seeing. Now, the goal of this type of painting at this stage is to remove all the umber that I used as a wash for the underpainting. So why even do a wash? Well, the wash unifies all the colors on the color palette so that it all remains in the same light sphere. So now I'm mixing these grays onto the brown, but they're all picking up a little bit of that brown, which is going to unify the color palette. I'm starting to do the background of this painting, and this is the one part of a painting from a traditional painting and painting before the Impressionists, where the old masters would actually just mix a color straight onto the canvas. And the reason they would do this is because, as you'll see, these like really big flat brush marks that are really textural using wet paint is really kind of creating a sense of atmosphere or air or light in the background of this painting. You get like a small perception of movement, and this doesn't feel like so static like this still life exists in a vacuum. Instead, you feel like there's oxygen in the room of this still life. And so for the background, it's okay to use more pigment and really just kind of play with the directions and going in different ways, in different diagonals, and introducing that into your background, because that's really going to create some movement and life to the background of your painting. I'm starting to already be pretty happy with this painting and feeling good about where it's at for a first session. Galkyd and galkyd lite take about a day to dry, so I'm going to let it do that. But I've got a good blocked in painting, and when I say try to have your paintings blocked in by next class, this is what I mean. Big brushes, just laying down the approximate values of things, but we're not mixing any color yet. We're not switching to the round brushes or the shaped brushes. We're just trying to get a sense of where we're going to take this painting in the future. And again, I would do this session, which will take about an hour, hour and a half, and then wait a day or two and you'll be ready to start taking this painting to the next level.